When people think about forests disappearing, the explanation usually sounds simple. Humans are cutting down too many trees. Logging, agriculture, and urban expansion are often blamed, and they are part of the story. But the real reason forests are disappearing is more complex, more systemic, and far more difficult to solve than most people realize. This isn't just about chainsaws and bulldozers. It's about global demand, economic systems, hidden supply chains, and everyday decisions that connect people across continents in ways that aren't immediately visible. To understand what's really happening to forests, we need to look deeper. Let's start with a basic fact. Forests aren't just being cut down randomly. In most cases, they're being cleared for a specific purpose. And that purpose is usually tied to producing something people use every day. One of the biggest drivers is agriculture. Vast areas of forest are cleared to make room for crops like soy, palm oil, and cattle grazing. These aren't niche products. They're embedded in global food systems. Soy, for example, is rarely eaten directly by humans. Instead, it's used to feed livestock like chickens, pigs, and cows. So when demand for meat increases, demand for soy increases, and more forests are cleared to grow it. Palm oil is another major factor. It's one of the most widely used vegetable oils in the world, found in everything from snacks to cosmetics to cleaning products. It's cheap, efficient, and incredibly versatile. But producing it often involves clearing tropical forests, especially in regions like Southeast Asia. Cattle ranching is also a major contributor, particularly in places like the Amazon. Forests are burned or cut down to create pasture land. Over time, this land can become degraded, leading to even more forest being cleared to replace it. So already we can see something important. Forests aren't disappearing just because of local decisions. They're disappearing because of global consumption patterns. But agriculture alone doesn't explain everything. Another major driver is infrastructure development. As countries grow economically, they build roads, highways, and railways to connect regions and support trade. These projects often cut directly through forests, and once a road is built, it opens up previously inaccessible areas. This is where things accelerate. A single road can lead to logging operations, mining activities, new settlements, and further agricultural expansion. It creates a chain reaction. What starts as one development project can quickly transform an entire landscape. Logging itself is also more complicated than it seems. Not all logging is illegal or uncontrolled. In fact, a large portion is done legally and regulated. But even legal logging can contribute to forest loss, especially when it's not managed sustainably. Selective logging, where only certain trees are removed, can still damage the surrounding ecosystem. It creates gaps in the forest, alters microclimates, and makes the area more vulnerable to fires and further clearing. And then there's illegal logging, which is harder to track and often more destructive. It thrives in regions where enforcement is weak and corruption is present. Timber from illegal sources can still end up in global markets, mixed with legal products, making it difficult for consumers to know where it came from. But here's where the deeper issue comes in. The real reason forests are disappearing isn't just because of these individual activities. It's because of how the global economy is structured. Modern economies are built on growth. Companies are expected to expand, produce more, and increase profits. Countries aim to grow their GDP. Consumers are encouraged to buy more, upgrade more often, and seek lower prices. Forests in this system are often seen as underutilized land. If a forest can be converted into farmland, a plantation, or a mining site, it suddenly becomes economically productive. Standing trees don't always generate immediate financial returns, but cutting them down and replacing them with crops or livestock does. This creates a powerful incentive. Even when governments recognize the importance of forests for biodiversity, climate regulation, and water cycles, they still face pressure to develop economically. For many developing countries, clearing forests can seem like a necessary step toward growth and poverty reduction. So the problem becomes a trade-off. Protect the forest or use it to generate income, jobs, and infrastructure. And often, short-term economic benefits win. There's also a timing issue. The benefits of keeping forests intact, like stabilizing the climate or preserving ecosystems, are long-term and shared globally, but the profits from clearing them are immediate and local. That imbalance makes it harder to prioritize conservation. Now let's talk about something less visible: supply chains. Most people don't see the connection between their daily purchases and deforestation. When you buy a chocolate bar, a shampoo bottle, or a piece of furniture, there's no obvious link to a forest somewhere in the world, but that link exists. Products often pass through multiple layers of suppliers, processors, and distributors before reaching consumers. Along the way, raw materials like palm oil, soy, beef, or timber are sourced from different regions. By the time the final product is on a store shelf, tracing its origin can be extremely difficult. This complexity allows deforestation to continue somewhat invisibly. Even companies that want to avoid contributing to it can struggle to fully monitor their supply chains. Some progress has been made. There are certification systems, sustainability pledges, and corporate commitments to reduce deforestation, but enforcement and transparency remain inconsistent. Another factor that's often overlooked is land ownership. In many forest regions, land rights are unclear or contested. Indigenous communities and local populations may have lived in these areas for generations, but lack formal legal recognition. This creates vulnerability. When governments or corporations claim land for development, these communities may be displaced or pressured to leave. Without secure land rights, it becomes much harder to protect forests. Interestingly, studies have shown that forests managed by indigenous communities are often better preserved than those under other forms of control. Their livelihoods are closely tied to the forest, and they have strong incentives to maintain it. But without legal support, their ability to resist external pressures is limited. Now let's address another key piece: climate change. At first glance, deforestation contributes to climate change by releasing carbon stored in trees, but climate change also feeds back into forest loss. Rising temperatures, changing rainfall patterns, and more frequent extreme weather events can weaken forests. Droughts make trees more vulnerable to disease and fire. Once a forest is damaged, it becomes easier to clear or burn. In some regions, this creates a dangerous cycle. Forests are cut down, contributing to climate change. Climate change then makes remaining forests more fragile, increasing the risk of further loss. Fires are a particularly important part of this cycle. In many cases, fires are intentionally set to clear land, but under hotter and drier conditions, these fires can spread beyond control, destroying much larger areas than intended. So what we're seeing is not a single cause, but a network of interconnected factors. Agriculture, infrastructure, logging, economic systems, supply chains, land rights, and climate change all interact in ways that accelerate forest loss. And that's why simple solutions often fall short. Telling people to stop cutting trees doesn't address the underlying demand for food, materials, and economic growth. Banning certain products without providing alternatives can create unintended consequences, like shifting production to other regions or industries. Even reforestation, planting new trees, while important, doesn't fully replace what's lost. Natural forests are complex ecosystems that take decades or centuries to develop. Plantations, on the other hand, are often monocultures with limited biodiversity. So what can actually make a difference? First, improving supply chain transparency is critical. When companies can trace where their materials come from, they can make more responsible sourcing decisions. Technologies like satellite monitoring and blockchain are starting to help with this, but they need to be widely adopted. Second, strengthening land rights for indigenous and local communities has proven to be one of the most effective ways to protect forests. When people have legal ownership and control over their land, they are more likely to manage it sustainably. Third, shifting consumer demand can play a role, but it has to be realistic. Reducing waste, choosing certified products, and being aware of what goes into everyday items can collectively influence markets. However, placing all responsibility on individuals isn't enough. Large-scale change requires policy action. Governments can enforce stricter regulations on deforestation, provide incentives for sustainable practices, and invest in alternative economic opportunities that don't rely on clearing forests. International cooperation is also essential. Since supply chains are global, efforts to reduce deforestation need to involve multiple countries working together. Finally, redefining how we measure economic success could have a long-term impact. If ecosystems and natural resources were valued more accurately in economic systems, preserving forests might become a more attractive option than destroying them. In the end, forests are disappearing not because people don't care, but because the systems driving their loss are deeply embedded in how the world works. Understanding that complexity is the first step, because once you see the full picture, it becomes clear that saving forests isn't just about protecting trees. It's about reshaping the forces that are pushing them to disappear in the first place.